That's a clown question, bro.
I'm
gonna kick some dirt.
He gets on base.
You get a ground ball with eyes. You get a dying quail.
I'm not the type of player that's going to be Johnny Hustle.
If you don't want me to watch the ball, you can go get it out of the ocean.
All right. Well, this is the show to be named later, where we are talking baseball kind of whenever. I got Daniel Curran over here on Zoom. There's me under the name Michael Gianta, because this is my dad's Zoom account, but it is my middle name, so it's sort of like Michael Gianta. Today, we're going to debunk a certain man, a man who's been praised
you
by
all
the
know.
baseball community. What was that?
A man who you all know.
Yeah, a man you're very familiar with for, his 3 MVP awards, his career 1,000 OPS. But we're here to tell you why it's all a bunch of hogwash.
What if Mike Trout isn't actually the best player in baseball right now? And what if he doesn't have a chance to go down as the best player in baseball history? Chris, I was very active on my Instagram. So for those of you who don't know, I have a baseball-related Instagram that I've had for about 5.5 years now. I got it between 7th and 8th grade. And I was bored out of my mind in this quarantine yesterday. So I put out a little thing for my followers to type in any active player. Doesn't matter who, they just got to be active. And I'll give a stat to show that they are overrated, no matter who it is. If it's Jacob deGrom, I'll do it. If it's Bobby Wilson, I'll do it. I will find a stat to make every single person overrated. So I do this. And, of course, the first person I get requested is Mike Trout, because why would you send anyone else? It's Mike Trout. And initially I was going to send, he's never won a Gold Glove before. Woo, he can't play defense. Oh no. And obviously that's not his fault. He's competed with a lot of great American League center fielders, Kevin Kiermaier, Kevin Pillar, Jackie Bradley Jr., Byron Buxton, another one. Like, there's a lot of competition for defense out in AL center field, so can't really blame Mike Trout for not having a Gold Glove. But Chris comes in from the top rope with an absolute slap in the face to anyone who thinks Mike Trout is anything good of a baseball player. Chris, do you care to go ahead and explain?
So, I've been, for the past 8.5 years, I've been hoodwinked. I've been hoodwinked by the man that wears number 27 on the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And I thought he was a good baseball player until I realized it's all a sham. Because in the 5th inning, with no outs, on the road, through a 2-2 count, in 21 plate appearances, he is 0 for 18 with a 143 OPS.
0 for.
0 for, completely.
He could not have done any worse.
Yeah, literally.
The batting average and the slugging percentage variable there.
Luckily, some pitchers are still scared of him and want to walk him.
I mean, we have to consider there are some times where they're home and it's not the 5th inning and there are people on base. But I mean, we have found Mike Trout's weakness. People have been trying to do this for 8.5 years. No one's quite done it yet. And here on the show to be named later, we are giving you what nobody else can give you, and that is where Mike Trout is not even bad, but quite terrible if we're being completely honest here. I mean, an offer, not even one hit, not even one that got through. In 20, and it's not like 0 for 3. It's 0 for, you said 18?
0 for 18, yeah.
I had 21 yesterday, but even then.
Well, like, it was 21 plate appearances.
But 18 at bats because he walked 3 times.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense.
So, and you might think, it's through a 2-2 count. No one does well in a 2-2 count. But comparatively speaking, this guy still stinks. This guy still stinks in this situation. I mean, since Mike Trout's debut, which was July 2011, I forget the particular date, but since Mike Trout's debut, the league average for guys batting on the road with no outs in the 5th inning through a 2-2 count, the league average has been a 199 average with a 602 OPS. So Mike Trout is miles away from that, as he has a 0.000 average with a 143 OPS. And also, since his debut, there have been 478 batters to have to be in this situation. 478 batters to have 5 plate appearances in this situation, and he ranks 434th in OPS, and of course, dead last in average. So, and slugging as well.
At what point do we consider stripping Mike Trout of all 3 of his MVPs and taking away his $430 million extension contract that he got from the Angels last year?
Yeah, and this has to go legal, because you think anyone who's ever bet on the Angels at, a casino, or it's completely legal now. So anyone who's bet on this absolute bum has been absolutely hoodwinked by the media, the government, the United Nations, everyone. Everyone has said Mike Trout is good at baseball.
Even the aliens. I bet the aliens think he's good too.
Oh, yeah. This is an intergalactic opinion, and it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Absolutely shameful. I mean, how have we not seen that? I mean, I'm very excited because, Chris, whenever baseball comes back, I am going to pay attention to Angels games whenever they're on the road and it's the 5th inning and Mike Trout is due to lead off the inning or something like that. It's like, we were joking around about this last time. We were like, well, imagine he comes up, the announcer's like, well, he can finally get the monkey off his back right here. He can do what everyone has been publicly harassing him for.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was our Mike Trout little saga that we discovered yesterday.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to go along with the joke, but I'm sure there's people out there that don't understand the joke of it all, obviously.
By the way, this is quarantine. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah. Like, I sent a picture of just the Fangraphs thing to Daniel, and I just said, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
What am I doing? And I should be doing schoolwork, but no motivation to do that. But yeah. So yeah, Mike Trout obviously is fine, but we found his weakness.
We did.
2-2 count.
I can't wait for him to get into an 0-2 count and then the pitcher just those 2 intentional balls.
Yeah, that's what we were saying.
It's the easiest solution ever. You don't have to intentionally walk him. You just got to throw 2 intentional balls and then you're good.
Yeah.
There's no way statistically speaking, there's no way he gets a hit.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about, I took a probability and statistics class. That's ultimate.
We're both in the sports stats class right now.
Yeah.
Not that we really need that, but
the odds of him being on the road with no outs in the 5th inning with a 2-2 count, the odds of him getting a hit right now are 0 completely.
Yeah. You go based on the past.
Based on his history, 0 for 18.
That's right.
That's this, best player in baseball.
Right there.
You look at guys like, David Bodie. He has a 5,000 OPS.
Dawel Lugo?
Yeah, Dawel Lugo. He has a 5,000 OPS in that situation.
Fernando Tatis Jr. as well with a 5,000 OPS. They should all split the 430 mil.
Yeah,
that Mike is supposedly getting paid over the next 13 years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. Yeah, Dawel Lugo. I can't imagine his paycheck was that fat, and he's better than Mike Trout.
I can't imagine more than 30% of baseball fans know who Dawel Lugo is.
Yeah. I mean, I basically found out about him yesterday.
I knew he played for the Tigers, but I didn't know much about him as a player.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even know the Tigers part, to be quite honest with you.
Dang.
It is weird. It is weird on here because I have the phone right in front of where my Google Chrome tab is, so I can't really see. Can't really see what I'm doing. But today is our stats episode. So this is weird because we're doing our Periscope, obviously, as you can see here, and then we're doing a Zoom recording, and we're gonna send this link to Apple Podcasts, which should be approved because obviously this is quality content here.
All facts, no printer.
Yep. So the Apple Podcast says it gets approved within like 2 weeks, so that should be good. So if you're listening to the podcast form, welcome to the podcast. We get really into the numbers. If you want to go into like the archives, my Twitter is at @Chris_Gianta. We've periscoped every episode we've done since November, and we started the show in October, but we
started
didn't.
exactly October 1st, the day of the NL wildcard game. Of course, the famous Juan Soto against the Brewers game. Just a little archive because I love reminding the world of this. That show, I had a take that I said the Juan Soto era Nationals will be everything that the Bryce Harper era Nationals were not. And that took after that game alone, that already stood as true because they could never win a playoff series, period. But to go on and win a World Series, that is absolutely perfect for what I said was going to happen.
Yeah, you were, out of the gate 1 for 1 on takes.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that, and I didn't start like archiving the show until November when I didn't know how to. I just figured like Periscope would be a good way to archive, and if we can get this on Apple Podcasts, we're probably going to stop with the Periscopes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of the show update. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or even Spotify, welcome. Today,
if you're on Android, there's also a podcast downloader app that I use for Apple Podcasts.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. I've been Apple like since day one, so I don't know that struggle,
I've never owned an iPhone. Fun fact.
You're probably winning. It's probably not as expensive and it's probably just as good.
It's iPhone.
Yeah, it's a smartphone. It's good.
Exactly.
But today it's a good, if this ends up being our first podcast, it's a good one to start on because we're explaining all the stats we use, why some are better than others, how we kind of have to check stats with other stats. Like, for example, if a guy's ERA is low, his fielding independent pitching is high, we might have to check out, like, is he giving up hard hit balls at a high rate? Is he not? Like, how fluky is he? We'll get more into that.
We are putting you through baseball statistics boot camp today.
Yeah, because, especially, and it might sound a little condescending, but we're trying not to make it condescending. It's just the game has been kind of modernized lately, it's mostly just our parents listening, and they don't really understand what we're talking about when we say wOBA.
Yeah, no, exactly. Few people understand what expected weighted on base average on contact is.
Yeah.
Of course, you have us here, and we are both huge nerds, so that's okay. And we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we've learned from, other podcasts and,
Twitter personalities, particularly for me. That's been a big help, and a few websites. Chris and I, we use the same, mostly 3 websites when looking at baseball statistics, and they are Baseball Reference, Fangraphs, and Baseball Savant. Those are my main 3. I know, Chris, you like all 3 of those as well. There are a few others out there, Saber.com, RetroSheet, PitchFX, things like that, but those are my main 3. I think all of them are really helpful in their own different ways, which is a lot of fun. And it's cool to just it's almost like it's math that I'm good at, which doesn't come by very often.
Oh yeah, like order, you can kind of learn about order of operations through OPS and like slugging percentage.
Exactly.
How all that works.
Mm-hmm.
But and yeah, MLB Network, Brian Kenny gets really good with that. I kind of learned about WAR through MLB Now. It used to be called Clubhouse Confidential. I remember it was called that. But
way back.
Now it's MLB Now with Brian Kenny, and he's really into sabermetrics, which is kind of surprising because he used to be just like an ESPN anchor. but he's
Yeah.
actually kind of like a sabermetrician, which is
Which
pretty
is awesome. I love it.
yeah.
Like, he's like the Bill James that like gets more publicized essentially.
Yeah. And he's entertaining. He's kind of a controversial guy at times. He hates bunts. He what other controversial takes?
He loves the opener. He loves the opener.
Yeah, he does. He was
I
like the
remember
first person to suggest it.
yeah, pretty much. I remember last year he went to Ray's Fan Fest and he took a picture with Ryan Stanek and he was like, "This is the guy right here."
Like I think when it ultimately got approved, the opener was 2017 AL wildcard game. He was like
Yep.
the Yankees should use an opener.
They should have Chad Green pitch 1 inning.
Yeah, and
Something
they
like
did.
that.
Luis Severino got shelled, and they took him out after a third of an inning, and then they ultimately used their bullpen, and they only gave up one more run.
I remember like when he said that in like August or something like that, or like September, like long before the wild card game, and everyone was like, "Are you crazy? Like, why would you like? It's a 1-game playoff, and you're gonna have your bullpen. You're not gonna have your dependable starter who finished." And to be fair, Luis Severino finished third in the Cy Young voting that year, so I get not wanting it in that scenario, but obviously that's what ended up happening. Of course, the Yankees did have the best bullpen in the league that year anyway, but when that happened, everyone was like, "Well, I guess we all owe an apology to Brian Kenny now."
Yeah. Someone on Periscope just said y'all are nerds, and I would have to agree with that.
No, we definitely are.
Yeah. I don't know how long he's been listening to the show, but it's true. It's true. So yeah, so like when it comes to baseball stats, I think the guys that have been traditionally evaluated kind of wrong by like the common fan have been position players. And from the time I grew up, it's been what's his average, what's his home runs, what's his RBI.
Exactly. How many hits does he get?
Yeah, how many hits does he get? All that stuff. And Moneyball is also a good movie to kind of open you up on this stuff. Like what average home runs and RBI don't really represent is, how often they're getting on base outside of hitting.
How well they're driving the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how many bases you're getting. How many bases you're getting. How many bases you're getting when you hit the ball. So, we talk about. There we are. Daniel Curran has shown me the Moneyball DVD.
Yeah, it was sitting right next to my desk. It always is. It's my favorite movie of all time.
The Giantas also own Moneyball on DVD as well.
That's right. That's the movie I quote with my dad the most.
Yeah, I might have to like watch it soon just for the baseball cure.
Yeah.
They were talking about how, you need guys that can get on base. You need guys who can take walks, and it's usually not as simple as that, but it gets overlooked. And you look at a guy like Shin-Soo Choo, who, he didn't have like a long hitting streak. He had, he had like a 45 game on base streak though.
In 2018. It was in like July 2018. I remember the Red Sox were playing the Rangers then at Fenway. And it was at like 37 games at that point. And I was like, well, I want the Red Sox to win, of course, because I'm a Red Sox fan. But I also kind of want to see Shin-Soo Choo just get on base, however it is. If he walks, if he hits a home run, if he hits a double, I don't care. Get Shin-Soo Choo on base. And he kept it going throughout the whole series.
Yeah, because literally a walk is the same as a single, literally. Like I won't necessarily agree with the term a walk's as good as a hit, but a walk's as good as a single for sure.
The only play, I will correct you on this. The only place where that sort of changes is if it's like a hit that moves a runner from first to third. If it's like a single to right or something like that. Because a walk cannot do that.
Like when I look at runners in scoring position, I certainly look at average more than I look at on base percentage or OPS.
Yeah. My favorite is slugging, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. So the best statistic, we'll just explain. The best statistic offensively, the best statistic that you can calculate.
The most popular one.
Most popular one as of now is OPS. And I say one that you can calculate because there's ones like weighted runs created plus, which is
Yeah. I mean, if you ask me like, I don't know, when we started the show back in October, what my favorite statistic is, I would have easily said OPS. And sort of as we've, gone on with the show and we've both become smarter with, statistics and everything like that, I think it may have changed to weighted runs created plus at this point, but OPS is always something you have to look at with a hitter.
yes. Yeah. My thing is like I want to be able to calculate it. Might be like a pet peeve because when I explain these statistics, I want to be able to say like, oh, it's obviously, times on base divided by plate appearances. Then you add the slugging, which is total bases divided by at bats,
Yeah.
and then add those two.
Together.
It's simple math. Weighted runs created plus is like I can't really explain that off the top of my head.
It's insanity. I remember. So if for those of you that can't see, I have a Barry Bonds background behind me on Periscope. He's one of my, even though I never got to watch him play live, he's one of my favorite players that I've ever come across, I guess. In my senior year of high school last year, I did my senior thesis presentation about why I think Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. And I basically went into a deep dive on his statistics, but I didn't get too crazy with like the weighted runs created plus and the weighted on base averages and stuff like that. And I took a look at his career triple slash line, which I know off the top of my head is 298, 444, 607, and 1051. And I took time to explain, what on base is, what slugging is, and why it's important, and why OPS is one of the better stats. And yeah, it's a really important stat to know if you're a baseball statistician like us. And you really can't go wrong with it, which is the best thing about it. Like people talk about batting average, like but it doesn't fully determine how good a hitter is. It doesn't fully evaluate a hitter. OPS does that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
OPS, it's how often are you getting on base and how many bases are you getting, and also like
how well are you driving the ball?
Yeah, how well are you driving the ball? If there's a guy on first, can I trust that you can drive him in like on a double? Can I trust you to get a home run?
Or are you like a place setter? Like, this is gonna sound controversial, but are you like Derek Jeter, where like he's a credit first ballot Hall of Famer, like I'll give him that, but also an 817 career OPS, relatively low for a guy of his caliber, I guess. And he was a singles to right field type of guy, and nothing wrong with that. Hey, look, I mean, it got him 99.7% of the ballot, but in the grand scheme of things, with all these statistics, that's not exactly the ideal type of hitter in a perfect world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, with OPS, OPS, we look at, on base plus slugging. And I kind of explained it like on base percentage, literally very simple, times on base divided by, so times on base is like hits, walks, hit by pitches, divide that up by plate appearances. Slugging is your total bases, the amount of bases you're getting on hits. You divide that by at bats, then you add those two together, you get OPS, and pretty simple stuff. And then with runners in scoring position, I like to look more at average because if there's a man on second, and you walk, you're not driving the guy in. Mm-hmm. If there's a guy on second and you get a single, you're probably driving that guy in. So I like to look more at average than on base percentage with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, you nailed you put the nail on the head, Chris, with runners in scoring position. Obviously, that's where you sort of are able to change up your thoughts on batting average and walks and stuff like that.
So yeah, I decided to. Sorry for the Periscope viewers that I have to move my phone so much, but how it works on Mac is if you want to change tabs, it's on the bottom of the screen, and my phone is on the bottom of the laptop and it's covering all those, so I have to move the phone sometimes, but it's fine. So there's some quality seasons I'd like to point out that weren't represented well by the traditional average home runs and RBI standard that, has been looked at basically since like the live ball era, even probably before that. Live ball era is 1920, basically forever. So I look at someone like Jason Worth in 2010. There's actually 2 seasons that I'm looking at with Jason
I
Worth.
saw that in the prep sheet. I was like, man, that is a name I have not heard in so long.
Yeah, he's when he was with the Phillies in 2010, he was 14th in average at 296, which is, respectable. Tied for 15th in home runs, 27, respectable. And tied for 23rd in RBI with 85. So it's not, the kind of bars people set guys at is like, did you hit 300? Oh, that means you're good. Did you hit 30 homers? That means you're a power hitter. Did you get 100 RBI? Like, that's good.
Yeah.
He had none of those, but he finished 6th in OPS because he was 1st in doubles and he was 8th in walks. So, average home runs, RBIs, it doesn't look at, doubles are a big part that can contribute to your OPS, and walks also, contribute to kind of a large discrepancy in like average and OPS. And in 2014, that remained true. He was 10th in batting average at 292. He was tied for 37th in home runs at 16, and tied for 15th in RBI with 82. But he was 8th in OPS because he was 5th in the league in walks, and he was 11th in doubles. And his 82 RBI was also not representative of how well he hit with runners in scoring position, because with runners in scoring position, he hit 338 with a 1014 OPS. So it's not like he wasn't doing well when given the opportunity. He just didn't have a lot of opportunities to drive runners in.
Then and another thing, it's like, a lot of people relate this with like leadoff hitters, which is not fair, because if you're a leadoff hitter, how many opportunities with runners on base are you getting? Because you're obviously not getting any in your first at bat. And if you're following up the 8 and 9 guys in the lineup, chances are they're not getting on base as efficiently as you'd like. So, that's why a guy like, I look at Mookie Betts in, I want to say like 2016 or something like that. He had a great, almost MVP season. He lost to Mike Trout. But there was definitely a case to be made for him for MVP that year. Even as a Red Sox fan, I don't particularly have a problem with Trout winning, but a lot of people held RBI against him, which I thought was unfair. I'm looking at 2016 right now. I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2018. This was his MVP season.
Yeah.
He hit 346 with a 640 slugging. Both of those led the league. Also a 1078 OPS. But he only had 80 RBIs that season. And I say only, not in the sense that I really mean it, but that's what everyone was sort of suggesting is, oh, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you give it a try? He had 80 RBI. Mookie Betts was hitting leadoff. And the Red Sox, their catcher position in 2018 was pretty subpar, to say the least, offensively. They had Sandy Leon, Blake Swihart at times, Christian Vasquez before he sort of took off this last season. And a lot of people were complaining that Betts should have won it if he could only drive in, 80 runs a year. Which it's not particularly his fault if he's not really, if he's not getting anyone on for him. Yeah,
and that was also, God, I got some burpage going on, but it's, it's fine. Like, there was a case of like JD Martinez possibly winning too, because JD Martinez hit those traditional numbers right on. I forget his batting average. It was like 320 something.
I got you.
And then he had 43 home runs and 130 RBI. But I remember JD Martinez had the second most plate appearances with runners in scoring position. So he did great with runners in scoring position, but he also, he had the opportunities.
So you're talking about
2018.
Sorry.
So Do you
In
have it?
2018, he hit 330, had 358 total bases, 130 RBI, and 43 home runs.
Yeah, and also my point is JD's OPS was almost 50 points less than Mookie Betts.
It was 1031, which is about
40,
47.
47.
Yeah.
47 points. So, and I don't base it entirely on OPS, but because I am going to go over like if guys kind of have the same OPS, how I kind of evaluate things. And also, a guy with a higher OPS could still be worse than a guy with a lower OPS. So, and we could go over that, and that could be because of, not doing well with runners in the scoring position. It could be bad defense. It could be, the guy with the lower OPS got more stolen bases. It could be a lot of different things. That's why evaluating kind of baseball players, and that's why we love like award season, is there's so many different directions it could all go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna look at an overrated season first, because I had like 5 seasons that I would go over, but there's countless examples. If you want to look it up yourself, like Shin-Soo Choo in 2013, his average home runs and RBIs weren't great, but his OPS was up there because he got on base. Freddie Freeman in 2014, kind of the same thing. Matt Carpenter 2015, and then Joey Votto pretty much his entire career has been a guy that like his average, he has a career like 307 batting average, but his
Talking about that OBP.
But his home runs and RBI haven't always been up there because he walks so much, and that's just kind of his style, and it's not a bad thing. That's the point. It's not a bad thing.
Joey Votto has a career 421 on base percentage. 421. That is almost at Barry Bonds level, and Barry Bonds is barely human.
Yeah, I saw earlier. He's had 13 full seasons, I think, and he's led the NL in on-base percentage 7 of those seasons, more than half.
He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seasons on Baseball Reference. All of them full seasons where he had at least a 400 OBP.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that type of stuff gets overlooked if you're just looking at average home runs and RBI. And networks, it's a lot of it is on TV networks to kind of promote that. And one network I would say does it well is ESPN, because I think like you show the God, I hate moving this phone. But yeah, they show the stats as a guy. You picture the setting, like guys coming up, and you see like if it was JD Martinez in 2018, like his OPS was like the first thing that they showed, not his average home runs and RBI, which I like. And they also show the MLB average for OPS. But one season that was a 30 home run, 100 RBI season that was not really good was Albert Pujols in 2016. So the guy had 31 home runs, obviously very good in terms of home runs. And then he had 119 RBI, which was 3rd in the AL. But you know why he had 119 RBI? It's because he had the 3rd most plate appearances with the runners in scoring position that year. So he just had more opportunities, so he was able to drive more.
He also had Mike Trout hitting ahead of him.
Yeah, he had Mike Trout hitting ahead of him. God knows how many extra base hits he had.
Probably none in the 5th inning on the road with a 2-2 count and nobody on.
Oh yeah, you have to factor that in. But yeah, Pujols, he hit 309 with runners in scoring position that year, but like it's still not spectacular. So he had a 780 OPS in that year where he had 31 home runs and 119 RBI. It's because he he wasn't getting a lot of other extra base hits. He only had 19 doubles that year, and he had less than 50 walks, which is very, very subpar. And there's another guy that I should point out, Adam Jones. I think he's still kicking in the league. But he's a free swinging guy. No problem with that. So in 2013, he was 22nd in average at 285, which is very respectable. And then he was 6th in home runs at 33 and 3rd in RBI with 108, which is, 6th in home runs and 3rd in RBI. That's like MVP caliber.
Yeah.
His OPS doesn't really say that because he was 19th in the AL in OPS with an 811 OPS. That's because he was tied for 19th in doubles, which is, good, respectable, but not great, not up there with the home runs and the RBI. And he was tied for 125th in walks in the AL. He had 25 walks the whole year. And also had a lot of opportunities with runners in scoring position. He was top 20 in the whole league with runners in plate appearances with runners in scoring position. So he had more opportunities. He wasn't getting walks, so his average didn't really represent how much he was getting on base. So kind of an overrated season in terms of if you just look at average home runs and RBIs, it might look like a great season. But in reality, an 811 OPS, it's only like slightly above average, maybe just like at that above average level. A pretty good season, but it's not represented by his home runs and RBI.
And there are also plenty of seasons from this past year alone, 2019, that can perfectly reflect the idea that home runs and average and RBIs aren't as important as they used to be. One guy I would like to pull up right now is Renato Nunez from the Baltimore Orioles. This guy, He plays for the Baltimore Orioles, and he had 31 home runs and 90 RBI last season, which, it makes you think like, wow, he's a great slugger. He can hit the ball really well. He does it consistently, 30 home runs, 90 RBI, especially on the Orioles. He had 244 average. I know we've talked about average a lot. Obviously, that is a bit of an outlier, but he had a 771 OPS, which is pretty weak for the home run and RBI numbers.
The American League average for OPS last year was 762.
Mm-hmm.
He was like 9 points above the average.
Yeah, and another one is Daniel Vogelbach from the Seattle Mariners.
Yep.
30 home runs and 76 RBI with a 780 OPS.
Yeah, we did point out last year, especially like the juice ball era, there were 8 guys in the MLB that had 30 home runs and an OPS less than 800.
Yeah, Hunter Renfroe was one of them. Cole Calhoun was one of them. There were plenty of them.
Yeah, and I should mention before there's any more confusion, I probably should have said it at the beginning. The league OPS last year was high. It was like 758.
Yeah, the year before that was like 727 or something like that.
Usually it's in like the 720s or 730s. It kind of changes based on era, but in the 2000s, it's generally been in between, like the average OPS has been in between like 720 and 750 for the most part, I would say. So yeah, like that's, so a good, like an above average OPS is like 800. A great OPS is 900. Then like MVP level is 1,000, upper 900.
Barry Bonds is 1422.
Yeah, if you want to do yourself a favor, go to Barry Bonds' baseball reference page.
It's bookmarked in my computer.
It's just, it's really something.
The gold mine. Whether you like him or not, you can't deny the numbers he put up, even with the roids.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, like at least his baseball reference page should have its own plaque.
Yeah.
There should be a plaque of his baseball reference page.
You just print it out and just tape it to a wall somewhere in Cooperstown.
So yeah, that's kind of my breakdown of OPS. Why, the average home runs, RBIs, it's kind of outdated. That's why I think baseball analysts are becoming more, quote unquote woke to it now. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of people kind of preaching the average home run RBI
Or even the eye test either.
or the eye test, because that's another thing. Let me look at this prep sheet. That's another
I'll get into the eye test later. There's something I do. There are a few things I do use the eye test for. Like defense is one of them. We're gonna get on that later because there are some different metrics. But the eye test, especially for a hitter, is sort of outdated. It's not as much as like you have to see a guy. You can't watch with a computer. It's like, well, actually, you can do both.
Yeah,
you can absolutely do both.
And the last thing I wanted to do with OPS was like, all right, well, say two guys have like pretty much the same OPS.
Yeah.
How do I evaluate who is better? And the example I am using is the 2018 National League Rookie of the Year race. It was between the top two guys were Juan Soto and Ronald Acuna Jr.
Yeah. Two guys that are going to be exciting to watch for the next 15, 20 years.
Yeah, hell of a Rookie of the Year race. So Juan Soto, they had their OPSs were 6 points within each other. Soto's was 923 in 494 plate appearances. Acuna's was 917, or his OPS was 917 in 487 plate appearances. So like the plate appearances were pretty much the same, and the OPS was pretty much the same. So the main differences that made Ronald Acuna better was Acuna had 16 stolen bases to Soto's 5. He had a 341 average with runners in scoring position to Soto's 215 average with runners in scoring position. And Acuna had 4 outs above average. We'll get into outs above average later. But Acuna had 4 outs above average. Soto had -6. So Acuna in 2018 clearly had the better year because, OPSs were pretty much the same. But when you go into the base running and how they were doing with runners in scoring position and the defense, you could clearly tell that Ronald Acuna was better. So that's kind of my breakdown of OPS, how you kind of evaluate based on it. If there's two guys that have the same OPS, how you kind of evaluate outside of OPS, because obviously the game is more than hitting. And we'll get into the pitching later in the episode. But yeah, so Daniel, you wanted to talk about you mentioned you put in the prep sheet some other stats we should talk about.
Yeah, so I put 3 particular statistics in here that I wanted to go over, and all of these can be very confusing. So try to just bear with me here while I explain them. The first one is wOBA, which is weighted on base average. And the Fangraphs definition is it is a rate statistic which attempts to credit a hitter for the value of each outcome, single, double, etc., rather than treating all hits or times on base equally. wOBA is on the same scale as OBP, and it is a better representation of offensive value than batting average, RBI, or OPS. The weight changes slightly based on run environment, but the general formula is blah, blah, blah. And the general formula is absolute chaos. It's really hard to explain, but basically weighted on base average is it's like a better scaled version of on base percentage, where it's not like you get the same, or even like slugging, where it's like, if you are looking at slugging percentage, you get one total base for singles, 2 total base for double, 3 total base for triple. It's very basic. It's not exactly like that for wOBA. It sort of takes in more of like an MLB sort of average, where it takes in what league you're in, what ballpark you're in, the environment, and it sort of averages that out and puts in a little bit more accurate and attention to detail sort of statistics. And it basically judges how well you're getting on base based on that. So it has a lot of similar qualities with OBP, and it also has some similar qualities with slugging percentage. And I'm going to read off the top 10 weighted on base averages from the 2019 season, just so you can get an idea of who is doing a good job of keeping with the requirements of this statistic. So number 1 was Christian Yelich. Number 2 was Mike Trout. Number 3 was Alex Bregman. Number 4 was Nelson Cruz. Number 5 was Cody Bellinger. Number 6 was Anthony Rendon. Number 7 was Ketel Marte. Number 8 was George Springer. Number 9 was Juan Soto. And number 10 was Nolan Arenado. All 10 of those guys that I listed, all well-known names pretty much for the most part, except, maybe Ketel Marte might be an outlier because he's in Arizona and he's sort of young and getting a quick start. But the general consensus for wOBA is you got to be a legitimately good hitter to have a good wOBA. It's not like a stat where you're going to have a couple outliers out there. All 10 of those guys were great hitters last year. And Christian Yelich led with a 442 wOBA, which is roughly the same as like the leading on base percentage for every year. So it's not too hard to pick out what a good wOBA is. It's basically similar to what OBP would be.
Yeah, wOBA. Yeah, wOBA is an interesting one. It's like if on base percentage, slugging percentage, and OPS just all threw their hat in the ring and kind of had a love child.
Yeah, exactly.
And they made a different version of on base percentage, which is interesting. It's one of those things where yeah, there's not going to be a random guy in the leaders for wOBA. Like if you generally speaking, if you have a good OPS, you're going to have a good wOBA and you're going to have a good weighted runs created plus.
It's a good way of telling who the best hitters are, essentially. And one thing I like to point out, I mentioned how, the scores of what's a good wOBA is similar to a good OBP. Christian Yelich, of course, led with a 442. Mike Trout led OBP with a 438. So only 4 points of difference there between the leader of wOBA and the leader of OBP. So it's obviously, it's if you're looking for what a good wOBA is, if you're asking like what's good for that, just think about what a good OBP is, and that's essentially your answer, which is good because OBP is on base percentage and wOBA is weighted on base average. So it really determines getting on base, but also factors in the slugging portion of it.
Yeah. And then another statistic. Another statistic we should mention is BABIP.
Yeah.
BABIP it's not a word, it's an acronym. It's like NASA or USADA. USADA is U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. It's how they got Lance Armstrong, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, probably.
But BABIP is there's a word for that. Acronyms that make a word. I'm not going to get into that.
No, never mind.
Yeah, it's batting average on balls in play, and by balls in play, it means anything that can have a fielder's influence. And what that means is it's not a home run, it's not a strikeout, it's not a walk, it's not a hit batter. It's everything in between.
A flyout, a single, a double, a 6-4-3 double play, anything where the fielder can make an impact and the ball is hit into the field of play. That's what BABIP is. And essentially it's quite simple, honestly. It's just batting average on balls in play. And there is a bit of luck factored into it as well, which is I don't particularly prefer this one to wOBA like I just mentioned, but I do think it is worth mentioning because I will on occasion use it. The leader in BABIP last year, bit of a random name, but a guy who had a great season nonetheless, is Yoan Moncada from the White Sox. His teammate Tim Anderson also finished second, who also won a batting title. The top 10, this one is a little bit more random than the one for wOBA that I just mentioned, but it was Yoan Moncada, Tim Anderson, Brian Reynolds, Trevor Story, Christian Yelich, Leori Garcia, Danny Santana, Nelson Cruz, Whit Merrifield, and DJ LeMahieu. One thing I'd like to point out, other than like Nelson Cruz, not a whole lot of power in that bunch there. It's really just how well are you hitting the ball, just like how well you're placing it, basically. Which that's not necessarily a skill that you can learn. There's a lot of luck in that too, but it's you can't be terrible at hitting the ball to have a good BABIP.
One thing I'll add on BABIP is the league average every year pretty much is like 300 for BABIP, and usually like I wouldn't say it's all luck. I mean, guys who can hit line drives, like how they teach you in Little League, just hit line drives, place the ball. I feel like Jeff McNeil would have a good BABIP, but I'm not sure.
He's a 337.
Yeah, 337. So that's way above the average. but someone who used to not have a good BABIP was Joey Gallo, and then he had a good BABIP last year. It's not BABIP isn't a stat to really rely on to.
It's not the strongest one, but it's a good one to know.
It's a good one to know, and you could also say that if a pitcher might be having bad luck, if they have a high BABIP against, or good luck if they have a low BABIP against. But also, I would say, like, if you have a low BABIP against, you're probably good at getting weak contact, which is also another thing we'll get into the pitching side. But Daniel has a particular stat that he really likes: weighted runs created plus. Do you want to talk about it?
I would love to. So WRC plus stands for weighted runs created plus. It is another rate statistic, just like wOBA, which attempts to credit a hitter for the value of each outcome rather than treating all hits or times on base equally. The first part of the definition is literally the exact same as wOBA, but it also controls park effects and current run environment. Weighted runs created plus is scaled, so the league average every year, no matter what, is at 100, and every point at above or below 100 is 1 percentage point better or lower than the average. So it is the stat runs created, which essentially is like, it's as simple as it sounds. How many runs are you creating, in the sense that you're hitting home runs, you're driving runners in, you're putting runners in a position where they can score, and then it's adjusting that to the ballparks. Anytime you see a plus in a stat, like weighted runs created plus, OPS plus, ERA plus, it's always ballpark adjusted. So it depends on whatever ballpark you're in. And the thing you got to love about this one is the average is always set at 100, no matter what. It's a really easy number to remember, of course, and it does a good job of evaluating who the best hitters are. Mike Trout was the leader in weighted runs created plus last year with a 180, which essentially means he was 80% above the average hitter last year. And the top 10 list, I'm not going to list it out, but it's very similar to what the one for wOBA was. And while we're on this fun little tangent here, I'd just like to address Barry Bonds in 2002 had his best weighted runs created plus. It was 244. He was 144% better than the average hitter in 2002.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about like weighted runs created plus, ERA plus, OPS plus, it's definitely a better evaluator for a guy. Like the obvious example is a guy who plays for the Rockies.
Yeah.
That's why Kyle Freeland finished higher in the Cy Young voting, despite having like a higher ERA. His ERA plus was in the top 4, I'm pretty sure. Go right ahead.
While we're on the topic of Rockies players, one thing that I strongly pushed during Hall of Fame season last year was Larry Walker, of course.
Yep.
I was a huge advocate for him, and my number one piece of evidence for why he's a Hall of Famer was his OPS plus. That was 141, which was tied with Chipper Jones, who got 97% on his first attempt on the ballot, showing that the big narrative against Larry Walker was that he was a Coors Field hitter. He played for the Rockies. Like he did well because of that environment. And OPS plus proved that he was good no matter where he was. And that's why I believe he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. And he just barely made it in his last year, but he made it nonetheless.
Yeah, and then like there's like guys who probably play in pitcher friendly parks. Like I might look at Mike Yastrzemski's OPS plus instead of his OPS because Oracle Park, as it used to be AT&T Park, that's like a more pitcher friendly stadium. So his OPS plus might show that he's better than what his actual OPS is. And I know that might be kind of hard to comprehend, but we're doing the best we can. It's kind of weird, but ballpark adjusted statistics are I think they're pretty important.
Yeah. While we're on Chris, we mentioned before the show how Barry Bonds was like doing what Babe Ruth was doing 80 years later. Babe Ruth's best weighted runs created plus in a season was 239. So Bonds beat him out.
Yeah, beat him out by 5.
He did.
Yeah, the Babe Ruth Barry Bonds thing is always always interesting. Like
Yeah,
obviously,
it's always fun because it makes people mad.
yeah. Like it is weird because it's like, yeah, like Bonds was obviously more talented, but it's like, different eras. I don't really like talking
It's
about it.
that and the moral aspect of it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I throw that out the window, but
Yeah,
you know,
and we've talked about it before, but it's like they didn't even start testing till '03. So did they really not want it in the game? I'm not sure.
it's hard to tell. I guess we'll
Like
never know.
steroid tests have been out there for a while, well before 2003.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's look at the prep sheet. Sorry for the audience. So yeah, it's all obviously with position players. It's not all about the hitting. You got to get into the defense,
Yeah.
and
The only reason I really look at defensive metrics is when it comes down to the big things. Like if we're looking at Hall of Fame candidacy, if we're looking at like league MVPs, that's like the one time I'll break out defensive statistics. Like I'm not gonna, just randomly look at a guy. Like when we did our season preview shows, when we highlighted each division and one player, I'm not gonna look too deeply into the defensive metrics. And be like, this is a guy you should watch. He can't hit very well, but he plays great defense, and that's why you should look at Byron Buxton or Jackie Bradley Jr.
yeah, we did 0 over-unders on anyone's defensive run saved.
Yeah.
But yeah, defensive metrics, like an example you pointed out for like RBI and why that doesn't work. The Mookie Betts versus Mike Trout, 2018 AL MVP race. Like Betts trailed him in OPS, but he was a much better defender and he stole more bases.
I was gonna say the defensive metrics don't like Mike Trout.
Yeah. And personally, we've staved away from any defensive metric that's on Baseball Reference, even Fangraphs. We go on Baseball Savant because that has the StatCast stuff. It actually kind of records.
I trust StatCast with my life.
Yeah, StatCast. We're so lucky,
I was born in the right generation.
Yeah, this humanity has been around for like 10,000 years, and we live in the StatCast era, baby.
We're like in our primes in the StatCast era. We're not like, like 30 years old, like not in college doing a show at our local radio station during the StatCast era. We are 18, 19 years old looking at Trout's exit velocity being in the like the 80th percentile in the league.
Yeah. So the Baseball Savant, that has all the StatCast numbers. Baseball Reference and Fangraphs, they do not have the StatCast numbers. So StatCast is like it measures, how many feet a certain guy goes to get a catch. It measures like
speed, like base running time, like how like first to third, second to home.
Yeah, sprint speed,
for uncertain occasions.
Route efficiency, like how good of a route an outfielder is taking to the ball.
Outfielder jump, catcher pop time.
Catcher framing even.
Jeff Mathis. That's the reason. StatCast might be the reason Jeff Mathis still has a job because of his framing. Like he's never been a good hitter, but boy can he frame a baseball.
Yeah, he can frame a baseball.
When I think framing, the first thing that comes to mind is always Jeff Mathis, no matter what.
Yeah, for some reason I just think of like Tyler Flowers, just because the way he like frames from the bottom of the zone is kind of interesting.
But Tyler Flowers can at least hit. Jeff Mathis is like a career like 180 hitter.
Yeah.
In like
nor is his OPS good. Nor is his OPS good. But like with StatCast, the best use of it right now, they have outfielder, outs above average, and now they've introduced recently for the 2019 season and beyond, infielder, outs above average. So you can basically tell how good of a fielder anybody in the league is now.
Hey, Chris, while we're on this topic, Jeff Mathis, his career slash line, 195, 254, 299, 552.
Yeah, 552.
In 15 seasons, he has a 552 OPS. His best OPS for a single season is 667 in a season where he had 3 plate appearances. His best full season OPS is 642.
That's actually insane.
Wild.
That is
Defensive,
actually insane. Like you can survive 15 years.
yeah, with a
Like,
550. That has to be. How many plate appearances does he have? Almost 3,000. If he is he still on a team right now? He's on the Rangers. We need him to get, let's see, 62 plate appearances here, so he can reach 3,000, which shouldn't be a problem.
Wow. All right. So yeah, keep on the lookout for Jeff Mathis and
1,000th career plate appearance, baby.
Mike Trout in the 5th inning on the road with no outs through a 2-2 count. Watch out for that.
Right.
So yeah, for defensive metrics, Daniel and I are going to go to Baseball Savant every time. Outs
Yeah.
above average is best for infielders and outfielders now. If you want to go historically, like if you want to go from like before 2015, it's going to be hard to rely on defensive metrics.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like going to, yeah, you can't go to Fangraphs or Baseball Reference. Like I don't like a lot of people sort of like defensive runs saved here and there. I'm sort of on and off with defensive runs saved. Like it can be useful sometimes, but like in the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna look at Baseball Savant first.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of how we look at position players. You start out and actually the big one. Got to talk about the big one. Wins above replacement. What is it? It's it's not something you
Probably
can
the most confusing statistic of all time. There isn't a defined calculation for it.
We're probably like the millionth baseball show to try and explain WAR.
I explained it in class the other week before we left, and our teacher was like, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." So wins above replacement it's simple if you really think about the name of it. It's basically an estimation of how many less or more games, usually less, a team would win if they didn't have the production that a certain player brought to the table. So Barry Bonds had on Fangraphs. Barry Bonds had a 164 weighted runs created plus, which suggests that teams that he was on would have won 164 less games.
You said
if they replaced him with like an average level player.
Yeah, 164 more wins than a replacement player. And I actually did some research, like just on my own time, and I kind of calculated. So like the Tigers had 47 wins last year, and I think their total team WAR was around 9. So like the replacement team would have 38 wins. I just did that. So like the replacement team isn't getting like 0 wins. They're getting, 38, 40 wins for a season. So, you can't, an average player isn't going to have a 0 WAR. An average player over a full season is probably going to have like a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, like what the average.
Yeah, wins above replacement.
Average, I guess, if you will.
A pretty bad player will probably have like a 0 WAR, and an awful player will be like -1.
Craig Kimbrell,
Lewis Brinson.
Chris Davis in 2018 had -3.2 wins above replacement, which is astonishing because normally if you have a guy that is capable of bringing you down to -3, you don't play him. But the Orioles had to play him because of his contract, and also they didn't have anybody else.
Isn't that crazy? Chris Davis, yeah, -3 wins above replacement. So according to that, he robbed them
of 3.2 wins.
3 out of 45 wins. Or was it?
Yeah, something like that.
47 wins. Yeah, I think it was 47 wins.
Yep.
He robbed them of like 7% of their wins, according to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, wins above
Absolutely.
replacement is what is like the ultimate stat, as people.
And by the way, like obviously it is an estimation. Like nothing that wins above replacement says is confirmed. But it's like we've said with wOBA and like we've said with weighted runs created plus, it's really good at saying who the best players are. Like Mike Trout is going to lead wins above replacement, and even without WAR existing, it's already a general consensus that Mike Trout is the best player in baseball.
Yeah. WAR is looked at a lot for like the Hall of Fame and stuff.
Yes.
So like when I look at a position player,
70 is the magic number.
when I look at a position player and like how to look at them, I'll start by looking at their wins above replacement, just to get a feel for them. Then I'll look at their OPS, and then like if I'm looking at a particular season, I'm probably gonna look at
Peak
like
WAR.
their but if I'm looking at like MVP race, I'll probably look at like their average with runners in scoring position, or just their general numbers with runners in scoring position. And then I'll look at like, did they steal bases? What was like their defensive metrics, if there was any defensive metrics. So yeah, that's kind of how we look at position players.
And also, there's a lot of different types of wars. Like Baseball Reference, for example, has the peak war, where Baseball Reference sort of estimates that like someone's peak or their best years is about 7 years long. So they'll take essentially the best 7-year long stretch. It's not the best 7 seasons necessarily, but it's 7 seasons in a row where they perform the best, and they'll take their wins above replacement over that time, and that's their peak war essentially. And usually a good peak war is around like 30 to 40, somewhere around there, around 7 years. And that's kind of that. And basically, like I just mentioned, the magic number essentially is 70. Like if you have 70, you're 9 out of 10 times going to be a Hall of Famer. Sorry, Lou Whitaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good topic for like Hall of Fame stuff. Yeah, like 70 is a Hall of Famer, and then once you get into the hundreds, you're talking about like that could be like the best player of a generation.
Yeah.
That's kind of an exclusive club. And then, if you're in the 50s, 60s, it's like, how did you do in the playoffs? Or like, what was your peak?
Exactly.
That kind of stuff. If John Lester's WAR is in the 40s, if he can have a good couple more seasons, I think his postseason resume might be able to eke him in like the 8th or 9th year.
He's on a decline though.
Yeah, that's correct.
Also, you got to go a lot more seasons because like we've seen a lot of guys like, no matter how good a guy's career may be, if they only play like 10 or 11 seasons, they're not going anywhere. And the perfect example of that in my mind is Johan Santana. He was absolutely electric with the Twins when he played, but he only had like 12 seasons because of injury, and he got knocked off the ballot after first year. Couldn't even get 5% of the vote.
Yeah. Same with Albert Bell.
Yeah.
Albert Bell had about 11 seasons. His OPS was over 900, I believe, but he just didn't have the amount of plate appearances that they wanted to see, and they just didn't think the longevity was long enough for him to, have that plaque in Cooperstown.
It might be a little too late for this, but if John Lester could sneak in a couple like 5-win seasons maybe, or maybe even 4-win seasons, you could be talking about a potential maybe late ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's one of the best postseason pitchers out there. He's not Bumgarner level, but he's up there.
He's the guy you can rely on every single time.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a good segue into kind of how we evaluate pitchers. Pitching, I believe, is not evaluated as flawed. It's not evaluated as badly by the common fan as position players, I believe.
Unless you use pitcher wins to determine how good a pitcher is, then in that case it's bad.
Yeah, the ultimate like pointing out of you can tell if a fan is stupid if you're looking at win-loss record.
Especially DeGrom. That's probably the best one.
Yeah.
I remember Michael Wilbon, I'll never forget, on Pardon the Interruption, he was like, they were talking about how like he would be disgusted if Jacob DeGrom won the Cy Young in 2018 when he had a 1.70 because he was like 11-8 or something like that. And he was like, well, he can't go out there and win the game, and that's what you rely on a pitcher is to go out there and win you the game, and he can't do that. And of course, it's not Jacob DeGrom's fault. It's the rest of his team. Either they will never score runs for him, or he will always exit with a lead, and the bullpen will proceed to give it right up.
So yeah, if you're still listening to this and you want an example of why pitcher wins is a bunch of hogwash, Example number one, Jacob deGrom in 2018.
Absolutely.
He had a 1.7 ERA. His wins above replacement for that season was the best for a pitcher in the decade
Yeah.
as a whole. Best season in the decade. Beats out Justin Verlander's 2011 when
And
Justin
Clayton Kershaw's
Verlander
2014.
wins.
And Clayton Kershaw's 2014.
Yeah.
Both of those guys won MVP.
But I look at Justin Verlander's because Justin Verlander had 2.4 times the amount of wins that Jacob deGrom had, but Jacob deGrom still had the better season in terms of wins above replacement, and rightfully should have because he had a better ERA. I think he had a better strikeout rate, better strikeout to walk, better fielding independent pitching, all those stats that we're about to get into. So that's why win-loss record as a pitcher, not many. I don't think anyone in the analyst world is really taking that seriously unless it's for maybe MVP, which I kind of get, but even that I don't really understand. But there's not a lot of analysts that are looking at win-loss record for the Cy Young Award anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you really can't at this point. I mean, Jacob deGrom single-handedly killed the pitcher win statistic.
Yeah.
Like, Chris, I'm going to be honest, when was the last time you looked at a pitcher's win-loss record when evaluating that at any point?
I must have been like 10, maybe 10.
Yeah. It's been quite a while. Like when we did our season previews, like I didn't look at that once. I wasn't like, when going back to June, this guy was 11-4. Like I didn't do that. You can't.
Unless it's like ridiculous and it shows how good the team.
I mean, like, and by the way, I don't want that to mean that I devalue like a 20 win. Like if you have a 20 win season, you deserve that. Like you're a really good pitcher if you have a 20 win season. You can't fluke that at all.
Oh yeah, I remember when we talked about Garrett Cole winning or Garrett Cole in the Cy Young contention.
Yeah.
I think from like May something on, he was 16-0. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean you can't fluke that.
But also he had like a 1.7 ERA, so obviously he put it.
You're not gonna go 17-0 with like a 3.5.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So ERA, it's kind of regarded as the best statistic for pitchers, and I believe
here and there, but like I think it's much more reliable than batting average which is the most common stat for hitters.
Yeah, ERA, I believe it should be the best statistic because especially for like starters, there's bad luck isn't something that you're really talking about. So like an alternate for ERA that that a lot of people look at is fielding independent pitching. I kind of use it as a bonus stat. Fielding independent pitching, for those who don't know, is like an ERA just based upon the amount of home runs you give up, the amount of walks you give up, and the amount of strikeouts you get. So it basically takes out any fielder influence. That's why it's called fielding independent pitching. So it's like just pitcher on batter, face to face, 60 feet 6 inches, what's going on, and it creates an ERA based upon those situations: the home runs, the walks, and the strikeouts.
One thing I like to point out. Okay, go ahead. Never mind.
The league-wide ERA and the league-wide fielding independent pitching is always the same. It's always like for the league, it's always the same number. So like say the MLB ERA for a year is 4.28, the FIP is going to be 4.28 because it's that alternate ERA and it kind of balances everything out.
So Chris, I know that you're not exactly the biggest FIP guy out there. I know it's not your cup of tea per se, and a reason for that is it takes out all the parts of pitching that a pitcher can't do anything about, like ground balls and stuff like that. It's solely what the pitcher does alone. And SI ERA is skill interactive ERA, and that substitutes that back in and creates a different like alternate ERA. And that's a stat that I didn't even put on the prep sheet, but I've actually started to get into it a bit recently. Anyway, SI ERA, of course, like I mentioned, Skill Interactive ERA is like a long line. It's another ERA estimator. The difference, obviously, like I just mentioned, it focuses, it puts into effect the balls in play, but also looks at the strikeouts and the walks and the home runs, and it still suggests their ERA because, like, whether or not you want to take out, in FIP, you want to take out the fielding aspect of it, it still exists. Like, there's no way a pitcher's ever going to go a game without, the fielders not having to do anything. And that's what I like about SI ERA is that it does a pretty good job generally of creating that that estimation, and it is more realistic because of what contributes to it.
Yeah, Skill Interactive ERA, it's an interesting one because like that's another like pet peeve with me is like how deep am I going to go into this? Like it's how, so that leads me to another point is I usually I'll use the term like checks and balances for this, but like I usually like to check the fielding independent pitching with stuff that you can find on Baseball Savant. So like fielding independent pitching, like basically for guys who love fielding independent pitching, they'll say a guy with a high fielding independent pitching and a lower, if the fielding independent pitching is higher than your ERA, that means that you're getting lucky. If the fielding independent pitching is lower than your ERA, that means you are getting unlucky. And I don't think it's as black and white like that. I think most people would agree that it's not black and white like that. So I usually go to, so like if there's a big discrepancy in ERA and fielding independent pitching, I like to go to Baseball Savant, which has all the StatCast stuff. So mouth's drying up a little bit, but it's all good. So I go to the pitchers. So like the hard hit rate that the pitcher is allowing. Hard hit rate is the percentage of balls that are hit 95 miles per hour or harder. So basically, like, are you giving up? Are you allowing guys to hammer the ball, or are you not? So if a guy has a low hard hit rate, then and they have like a high FIP, then I don't really trust that FIP. There's also a barrel rate, which is barrel rate. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like it has to be hit at least 98 miles an hour plus reach a certain launch angle as well. And it varies based on launch angle and exit velocity of what a barrel is constituted as. It's basically like, was that ball absolutely hammered? Yes, then that's a barrel. And then expected statistics, like Daniel has mentioned a lot. You went a lot towards like expected batting average and expected slugging in like your season previews.
I did.
So that's like, I don't know how they calculate that, but it kind of checks the hard hit rate because a 95 mile an hour ground ball to the shortstop is a lot different than a 95 mile an hour line drive an inch over the pitcher's head. Obviously, one is going to have a higher probability of being a hit than the other. So that kind of checks the hard hit percentage. But I usually go more towards the hard hit percentage because like expected batting average, I feel like there's too much up in the air. I don't know how much I can necessarily trust it. Maybe I can trust it, but I'm not sure. What do you what would you say on that?
Can you repeat that?
Like expected statistics, I kind of I think it's a little up in the air sometimes.
I mean, I view it the same way I view FIP. Like, it's a forecasting tool. I'm not going to say that someone's better than somebody else because of their expected slugging. I'm going to say, like, hey, this person is someone you could watch out for in the future because their expected slugging was through the roof compared to what their actual statistics were. That's kind of I basically just do it for 4. It's like the weather. It's like, hey, you can't say that the weather is going to be good based on what the weatherman says, because that's that can be wrong sometimes. But it's like, hey, it'll probably be sunny on Sunday, almost like that. And it's the same idea as like, hey, this guy could start driving the ball a lot better in the coming years if they have an expected slugging where it is.
Yeah, if say Jacob deGrom had a pretty high ERA to start the season, but his expected batting average against wasn't that high, it's like, oh, he'll probably,
Snap out of it.
the game will balance out. That's the thing with baseball, is it always kind of balances out at the end.
Yeah.
So why? So an example of how I would kind of check ERA and how I would check fielding independent pitching. So someone who had a large discrepancy between ERA and fielding independent pitching was Jose Urena in 2017. So he had a 3.82 ERA and he had a 5.2 FIP. It's rare to see a guy have an ERA and a FIP even half a run apart.
Talk about social distancing.
What did you say?
Talk about social distancing.
Oh, big time. Yeah. His ERA and FIP were an ocean across each other.
They were definitely 6 feet apart.
Big time. They were 1.38, quote unquote runs apart. So that was so Jose Urena's FIP was so high because he's not a strikeout guy. He had 6 strikeouts per 9, and then 3.4 walks per 9, which is relatively average, and then 1.4 home runs per 9, which is slightly above the average, probably kind of at the average. So his FIP was high, so you might say, oh, Jose Urena was probably getting a bit lucky. But I go to Baseball Savant, I check, I see that he has 30.8 hard hit percentage against, and that was top third in the top third of the league. And his 85.4 mile per hour average exit velocity was in the top quarter of the league. And his fielding independent pitching was bottom 5% of the league. So I'm not really going to trust that he was getting unlucky, or I wasn't really going to trust that he was getting lucky there. I'm just going to say that FIP doesn't like him, and he's just kind of a ground ball, just a pitch to contact, get soft contact kind of guy. Yeah. At least for that season. And another guy, so there's multiple examples. In the same year, Lance Lynn had a 3.43 ERA and a 4.82 FIP. Another guy who doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, 7.4 strikeouts per 9, 3.8 walks per 9, and 1.3 home runs per 9. Kind of in the same ballpark of what Jose Urena was doing. God, that's a hard name. But Lance Lynn, his hard hit rate was 27.3%. So that was top 11% in the league. And then his average exit velocity against was top 32% in the league. But his fielding independent pitching was in the bottom 10% of the league. And I'm not saying every time that the high fielding independent pitching is nonsense. I mean, I looked at a guy, I don't have it in the prep sheet, but I looked at a guy like Dakota Hudson last year. He had a high discrepancy between ERA and fielding independent pitching, and it was kind of justified because his hard hit rate was 25th percentile.
I've seen a lot on Instagram, specifically Cardinals fans, sort of saying that Dakota Hudson isn't as good as everyone wants to say he is, and that can be slightly overrated, which is, I mean, it's definitely weird to see from such a young guy like him and his own fan base saying that, which I think is a little crazy, but it's the numbers do back it up, with the expected statistics and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was towards the bottom in terms of percentiles.
Yeah,
expected statistics. So that's something where fielding independent pitching might help. And then there's of course other situations where the fielding independent pitching is lower than the ERA. I didn't point out specifically those examples, but yeah, that's my breakdown of kind of how I check all the pitching statistics.
And yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add on like how you evaluate a pitcher?
I mean, I do look at ERA, like you can't not. I just mentioned
Oh,
SI ERA I've been getting into a lot lately. Strikeouts per nine is a good one for me. That one's pretty basic. Especially, you know, in this new age of strikeout and home run are becoming much more, you know, there was more strikeouts than hits last season for the first time since the dead ball era, or something like that. So strikeouts per nine is definitely a good one for me. I think in the coming years I'm going to start looking at I can't say this year, which is painful, but
yeah.
you know, I think in the coming years I'm going to look at SI ERA more than FIP. I remember in 2017, I looked at FIP and I took my fantasy baseball players just based on like pitchers with like less FIP than
Yeah.
ERA. I finished like dead last that year. It was a terrible idea, but like I remember I put Luke Weaver in my rotation, and he had like a 4.5 ERA that season. It was bad. But I mean, yeah, like Chris, I like what you said there on why you didn't rely on FIP so much. I agree with you, and those are my thoughts on pitchers.
Yeah. So basically, the breakdown of it is I kind of look at the pitcher's ERA first, kind of get a feel for how he is there. Then I look at the fielding independent pitching. If it matches up, then makes sense. If it doesn't match up, then I go to Baseball Savant. I look at the hard hit percentage. I look at the exit velocity, barrel rate. Then I go into the expected statistics, see what I can find there. Is this guy a fluke? Is he not? Could he have more potential? Could he not? And then, of course, strikeouts for sure. That's involved in fielding independent pitching. Strikeout to walk ratio is also a good mark for how a pitcher's doing. So yeah, that's our stats episode. I'm hoping this is our first episode on iTunes and Spotify.
Yeah. Moment of truth, though. We got one more thing to do.
What is it?
The lottery.
Oh, right, the lottery. So
I've been waiting all show for this.
All right, so yeah, that's our statistics episode. This is a show I'll probably reference until we just stop doing shows, because we just went through it all for like an hour and a half. So
right.
Anytime my mom is talking about like, what are you talking about with barrel rate? I'm like, I explained it on our April 2nd.
April 2nd, 2019 or 2020 show. I don't know what year it is.
The April 2nd, 2020 show.
That's right.
Or the first episode on Apple Podcasts. It's all right there. It's all right there for you. Laid out perfectly, in my opinion.
So with obviously the quarantine happening, no baseball being played, no news at all, there's not a whole lot to talk about. So Chris and I are going to give ourselves topics. And next week when we do our show, at this point, we don't know what we're talking about, but we're going to find out. So we've decided that each show for an hour, we're going to highlight one player's entire career and then one team. And we're just going to go through their entire season, break it down from every angle. And I wrote a list, or like a lottery sort of list of 30 teams throughout MLB history, one team for each franchise, most of them pretty recent. Chris, you have a list of players, and we have them all numbered. So I am going to, Chris, we'll do the player first.
Okay. Do you want to pick your number, or should I like randomize a number?
Random. I'll pick a number.
I was a little unprepared with the computer randomizer, but I feel like it would just be justice if we just randomized here. I could go to a computer randomizer and try to do 1 through 10, because I do not have 30 players prepared yet. I was preparing for the stats stuff. Yeah. And it's so stressful as like a college student, and I just
Marty, I'm broke.
Literally just swimming
out of $9.
It's just okay. Yeah. The result is 9, and because it's in my notes app, I'm trying to remember what 9 was. 9. Number 9. Trying to think.
Drum roll, please.
I can't go to the notes app because I think that'll stop this Periscope.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'll just pick the guy because he was in the list, and I know it kind of takes away from the randomization.
Okay.
It was inspired from a discussion you and I had. It was based on the trivia, and for some reason I just forgot about George Brett.
George Brett. All right, I love it. I love it.
So I should just do research on my own because
I will.
I just noticed on my own, like in terms of my baseball knowledge, I think it's the weakest between the 70s and 80s, I would say.
Perfect. I mean, hey, the one thing that stands out about George Brett's career that everybody knows is the Pine Tar game, so I'm sure we'll spend some time on that. I might just rewatch that game if I can. I'm sure it's available somewhere.
Yeah.
And we will be breaking down George Brett's entire career. Chris, for the team we will be breaking down, pick a number 1 through 30.
9.
Oh, boy. Okay. We will be doing the 2012 with Triple Crown Award winner Miguel Cabrera, Detroit Tigers. The
Wow.
2012 Detroit Tigers and George Brett. That will be our next show.
That's funny because I've been going on a postseason game on YouTube binge, and I've been trying to go chronologically, and I watched 2 of the 2012 World Series games. So
Perfect. So you got that knowledge fresh in your head.
Didn't paint the Tigers in the most positive light, but they were a very good team.
Oh, we definitely we will shine a light on the Detroit Tigers next week as well as George Brett.
One thing I will say, I think, and I look back at the Cy Young voting, I think Justin Verlander should have won that year.
All right, well, we'll discuss that next week.
Yeah. So next week, I don't think this will be on the Periscope. It'll probably just be on Apple Podcasts. We will be discussing. Are we going to be discussing the player first or the team first?
Let's do the player first.
So yeah, we'll start off. We'll dedicate a half hour to George Brett's entire career, and then we'll dedicate a half hour to probably more. Honestly, let's be real. Probably more to the 2012 Detroit Tigers, which should be a very interesting episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be fun. We got Max Scherzer in there. We got rookie Rick Porcello, I believe. Was he a rookie in 2012? Maybe.
I think he joined the league in 2011.
Oh shoot, yeah, you're right. Because I was. Yep. Okay, never mind. You got Max Scherzer on the Tigers. Of course, like I just mentioned, you got Triple Crown Award winner Miguel Cabrera. I know that we just spent an hour plus explaining why those 3 stats don't matter anymore, but Triple Crown is impressive regardless.
Yeah, you got Dougie Fister.
You got Doug Fister. Yeah.
He's up there. You got Torrey Hunter. No.
Yeah.
Okay. There was Torrey Hunter?
You got Prince Fielder.
You got the first year of Prince Fielder when he was good on the Tigers.
1 of 2. He was on the Tigers for 2 years.
You got man, my chair is loud. Who else? I mean, Austin Jackson wasn't great.
Yeah.
Did they have John Travolta yet?
No, he was on the Cardinals then. Let me look up. Actually, we should save this for next week. I was gonna look up the war leaders, but let's save that.
All right. So, yeah.
Yep.
That'll be our episode. So yeah, next week we'll talk about George Brett. Then we'll talk about the 2012 Tigers. It is going to be weird when people see the titles of the episodes where it's like these 2 have no connection whatsoever.
None. I was kind of hoping you would pick my Royals one just for like coincidental.
Yeah.
Things.
But yeah, like one thing with me is like I can kind of adapt to things kind of well, and like I was excited to talk about the 2020 season, but now I'm really excited to just talk about players,
I am too.
Random teams.
We can do that better than most other people.
Oh yeah, for sure. We can base opinions on a computer better than a lot of people.
By the way, I would just like to give a little PSA going forward. When these teams that I wrote down, I can't speak, but they were all obviously very good teams. But for some of them, it's not necessarily the first team you're going to think of when you think of that certain franchise. Like I know I'm not going to name any names, but there's a few teams that Chris, I'm sure you were expecting to talk about that is not going to be the team that we're talking about for a specific franchise.
Yeah, like there's teams that won the world. There's teams that like won the World Series, and that wasn't even the best season of that era.
I'm not even going like best. I'm like obviously I'm going best, but like I'm also going on most interesting.
Yeah.
Like like I had a really tough time deciding between 2012 and 2013 when I looked at the Tigers, or even 2011. They actually won more games in 2011 than both of those years, believe it or not. But I thought 2012 was the most interesting. They went the farthest in the playoffs, and they also had Triple Crown winner Miguel Cabrera.
Yep, that's for sure. So yeah, that wraps up our episode of the show to be named later. I'm hoping this is the first episode on Apple Podcasts. Probably the 30-something episode here on Paris. Here, just doing it with each other, maybe like the 20th on Periscope. But hope everyone enjoyed. It was good to kind of explain everything, get it all out there. It's all public information. So yeah, I have no idea how to close out a show. That was the show to be named later. You're not listening to 89.9 Springfield.
No, not for a while. But tune in next week for George Brett and the 2012 Tigers.